So Halo is a series I've wanted to get into for a while, as back in my console days I was always interested in seeing what was going on the Microsoft side of the fence. And you might be thinking, why the heck are you starting with Halo Wars? Why not Halo Combat Evolved? Well, my justifications are, after looking into the games, I found out that chronologically, according to the official Halo lore, the story in this game is first. Also, it seemed a bit appropriate considering the original Halo was going to be a strategy game like the Myth games Bungie had made before, until becoming a first-person shooter during development.
So this is the spawning...
This is Attack of the Clones.
Halo Wars wasn't made by Bungie, but instead Ensemble Studios, who created the Age of Empires and Age of Mythology games, which is some serious RTS pedigree. So it was in pretty safe hands to try and make a Halo RTS, but Bungie was very protective of the Halo IP, which resulted in some difficulties during development. And looking at some of the stuff Microsoft has done with Halo since Bungie left, you can maybe understand why they worried so much. Ensemble, when starting work in the game, wasn't originally trying to make a Halo RTS, but just trying to make an RTS game that would play well on a console, which is a tall order since controls for PC RTS games don't translate well to consoles. I've had some experience with that since the first time I ever played Command & Conquer was on a PS1. And yeah, if you don't know any better, the controls work, but just not very well. And if you go from that to playing with a mouse and keyboard on a PC, it feels like you've been completely unleashed. So Ensemble decided to try and make an RTS that worked on consoles first rather than the other way around, which other developers usually did by trying to jerry-rig mouse and keyboard controls onto a controller with mixed results. Ensemble experimented for a while and eventually got it working and showed it to Microsoft, who said cool, now make it into a Halo game, for reasons probably related to corporate logic. Ensemble did as they were told and got hard to work at making Halo Wars, with a fairly small team for many years, and announced the game with a cool trailer that got some excitement in 2006. Though in 2008, about 5 months before the game's release, Microsoft said it would close Ensemble after the game came out. No solid reason was given, again, corporate logic. But it was implied that Ensemble's failed MMO project and that they only made strategy games were reasons to close the studio. It's not like a lack of game studios in the future would cost Microsoft billions to replace or anything. To me, it seems Microsoft was a little too trigger happy, as the game did sell 1 million copies about a month after release, which for an RTS console game is amazing. And while you could put that mostly on the Halo brand attached to the game, I do think Ensemble made a pretty solid game. Which is a little sad, as it would have been interesting to see what else they could have done. Though even with them kind of forced to make a Halo game, they did go all out in trying to make it look and feel like Halo. Now, like I said at the start, I haven't played Halo games before, but I have seen trailers, watched some Bungie vids, and the occasional Halo lore video over the years, and a bit of other media. So while not being an expert or anything, I think I have a general sense of what feels like Halo. And maybe what doesn't. This game to me definitely gives some Halo vibes. The art style and music are pretty spot on. Like the cinematics that were made by Blur Studios are pretty great and are a nice treat to watch in between missions. You can also tell Ensemble put a lot of effort into the visuals and making the units feel like they were always part of the Halo universe. Especially for the UNSC units, of which a lot were made just for the game. As in the first 3 shooter games, from what I can tell, the only fighting units the UNSC had were Master Chief, some Warthogs, and a few Pelicans to transport him around on. Oh, and the occasional Scorpion tank for special occasions. I mean, from what I've seen, Master Chief was blowing up starships single-handedly, so they didn't need much else. But he wasn't allowed to be in this game, as Bungie didn't want to share, so Ensemble created some other units to fill out the roster and include some of their own Spartans, which I'll chat about later. Most units have a very distinctive shape, especially for the Covenant, where you can even easily tell apart the different types of infantry from grunts to elites with just a glance. To me, that's usually a good sign when first starting up an RTS. It might be because of Bungie's original designs that made enemy units easy to tell apart in the Halo first-person shooter games, but Ensemble translated well into this game. For some of the UNSC units, it might have been a problem, as from high up it would have been a little tricky to tell the regular Marines apart from the Spartans since they look similar from afar. But Ensemble added icons over Spartan and hero units to make it easier to tell who's who. You can tell the UI design is more for TVs than computer screens, with some of it being pretty oversized. I would have liked some options to resize these a little and for a wider field of view, though it doesn't hurt the game too much. At least the music is great, as you have all the beats Halo is known for, like epic orchestras with Gregorian monk chanting and a bit of tribal drums. And the game does use it to make moments just a little more epic than they would have been without it, which I did like. They also don't overuse it too, as the game mostly sticks with some nice calm tracks when the action isn't too intense and you're just building up your base and forces. One of the tracks actually reminded me a bit of StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty. I think it's because of the guitar strings. Which is a little funny, as Halo Wars came out before that game, so Ensemble were a bit ahead of the trends with that one. The rest of the audio is good, with units and vehicles sounding about how you'd expect, with the occasional bit of fun chatter.
We got grunt bits on the grill.
And the voiceovers for all the characters are good, with one sticking out to me but not in a good way. And I'm aware this is a bit biased and nitpicky since I'm coming from the other side of the console wall, but Nolan North, who seems to have been in every game since the dawn of time, just sounds like Nathan Drake if he enlisted in the UNSC and changed his name and got a haircut.
Well, this little field trip is a bust. Anders, is there anything out here except for that huge alien dome thing?
And it doesn't help that he's kind of playing the generic wisecrack action guy. He's not doing a bad performance or anything, but instead of seeing John Forge fighting, I see Nathan Drake with a buzz cut. I did try not to, but he could have changed his tone or voice a little, though maybe it was the voice direction he got from the studio. Like the other cast members do a better job. Take for example Serena, the sassy AI in the story.
Arcadia colony, to be precise. Population a little under 3 million, largely unexplored, but apparently quite the vacation resort.
That's Courtney Taylor, the same voice actor for Jack from Mass Effect.
Shit, you sound like a pussy.
See what I mean with being able to change voice and tone? Anyway, let's talk about the controls. The game actually feels pretty good if you play it with a controller. Like, it's probably the best RTS controls for console I've ever tried, and I've played a few like Tom Clancy's End War and Red Alert 3, and they were fairly clunky to control. This game feels pretty fluid compared to those. You can tell the focus to make the game work first on consoles did pay off. There is a bit of a learning curve to it, but the tutorial will tell you mostly everything you need to get up to speed using a controller. Also, there are little touches like a sticky follow camera if you hover over a unit, and it can make the game feel a bit more action-packed than a regular RTS. But I'm playing on a PC, so I wanted to play with a mouse and keyboard, and this is where you get a bit of a switch where an RTS feels a little clunky when you play it on a PC. Look, it's not bad and it controls fine, but the radial menu does feel a bit awkward than, say, a regular RTS menu on a PC would be. So this game is a little like seeing an alternate timeline where RTS games were more popular on consoles and had to be made to work on PC. And if you're thinking that crazy timeline will never happen, then let me remind you that you're currently living in the timeline where Sony owns Bungie and Microsoft owns Crash Bandicoot. But back to this game though. Other compromises you might have noticed needed to be made to make this game work on consoles. Like the base building, which is streamlined and fixed to certain points on all the maps, so you can't build wherever you want to. I understand why this is done, though I would have liked at least a little flexibility in where you can place defenses around your base, as you can only build in 4 specific spots, some of which the enemy won't attack you from. They did compensate by giving the turrets generous range, though I would have liked a little more if they gave you freedom of where to place them. The one good thing about the fixed base design is that it does force you to focus mostly on what you'll need for the level instead of just building everything, which would have been very tempting with how the game gives you resources, which are infinite, but restricted by how fast you get them by how many supply pads you build and if you upgrade them, which simplifies resource gathering in the game, but still needs to be considered a little when thinking about how to tackle the mission. Another thing that was simplified was the combat, as comparing it to other RTS games, it's not too complicated. I mean, it's still got the traditional rock paper scissors setup, so you'll need to think a little bit about what units to build for the situations you face. But you can get away with just building a big ball of units and steamrolling your way through some of the levels a lot of the time, which isn't always a bad thing, as who doesn't like to completely dominate their enemies? Though the game does compensate for this at times by adding some variety in the type of missions you'll occasionally get, so you won't always be building a death ball to win. But if it does get a little boring for you after a while, you can turn up the difficulty if you want a bit of a challenge, and it will make you have to micromanage more and think a bit more carefully about what units to build. Speaking about the units, they are pretty good. You've pretty much got everything you'd expect from an RTS, and they do add some character to the units that you'd expect from the Halo universe. They all have fairly standard attacks, but do have some special attacks which are really useful or good for offsetting a weakness a unit might have. They aren't always amazing, but do give the different units a little extra in a fight that keeps it interesting and sometimes entertaining. In skirmish mode, the units have some very powerful ones, like the Prophet of Regret can call an orbital strike, and the Arbiter has a rage special which lets him massacre enemy units. Like, it makes me a little sad that the Covenant doesn't have a story campaign, as that would have been pretty fun to use some of their units in the story. And Ensemble during development did have an idea to make an expansion where you would play as the Covenant, but Microsoft was already charging plasma beams to glass Ensemble at that point. Though the game in a way does let you play with some Covenant units in the story, as the Spartan units can hijack enemy vehicles, which is really fun to watch the animation of them committing Grand Theft Alien Auto. They are basically super infantry in the game, as expected, where they can take a lot of damage and dish it out, and even jump into your own vehicles to give them a boost in combat. The game does treat them with a bit of reverence, as from my understanding up until this point in Halo games, not many Spartans have been shown in action, apart from Master Chief. So seeing a group of them fighting, even a small one, was a real treat for fans. It's a little hard for me to imagine, since from what I've seen there are currently a ton of new Spartans now, though I can kinda get it if I think of it like a guardsman from 40k seeing a group of Space Marines for the first time and being just awestruck. You don't get many Spartans to control in the story most of the time, just 3. But that's more than enough. Which brings me to the topic of the limited unit cap, which is a bit small, though I don't think it hurts the game too much. There are missions we need to deal with multiple objectives at once, which will make you wish you had more, but you can usually make it work with what you have. and for a console RTS it does make sense given the limits Ensemble had to work with. And story-wise a little, with the UNSC being on the back foot for most of the war, does make sense with them having limited forces to fight with, as they do give a larger unit cap to the Covenant, though just making their units a little weaker than the UNSC ones, so it balances out when they fight each other. You can increase the unit cap of each faction with research, but it's only going to add like a little extra for your forces as you play. They do balance this a little by giving some interesting upgrades for units, but most are your basics of making your unit better at what they already do, or giving a buff to survivability. The upgrade I enjoyed the most was the one where you can make your regular infantry units into ODST ones, which lets you drop infantry wherever you need them on the map from the ship the Spirit of Fire, which has some fun abilities like the Mac Cannon and a freeze bomb that can be really useful in certain missions. It also makes the perspective you watch the battles from feel like you're commanding units from a ship in orbit, just with a really good zoom. So overall, while the gameplay is a little simple for an RTS, it's still fun with some challenges and story missions, which I should chat about. The general story of Halo being the UNSC, which is future humanity defending itself from being made extinct by the Covenant, an alien empire of zealots that worship the Forerunners, ancient aliens that disappeared tens of thousands of years ago but left a bunch of their advanced tech just lying around. This is where the story in Halo Wars comes in. It starts with Captain Cutter talking about humanity's grueling 5-year-long battle to retake the planet of Harvest, which has taken its toll on the UNSC, though they've almost won. This is when the Spirit of Fire arrives to help finish up the last of the Covenant on the planet, though Nathan Forge reports in that the Covenant are up to trouble by digging something in the icy parts of the planet. A scientist on board named Anders shows some scans and says that there's a structure underneath the ice where the Covenant are, and that's probably what they're after. She also gets ready to join Forge planetside to investigate further, which leads to him saying it's too dangerous for her to fly down. This gets a whatever dude eye roll from Anders. It's a bit cliche having the soldier versus scientist routine, but at least it's a little entertaining, when compared to Captain Cutter, who is a little too dry of a character to play off the cheeky remarks from the AI Serena. The first mission has you retaking a base back from the Covenant, who scattered the local UNSC forces, after which Nathan Forge spies on the Covenant opening up a Forerunner relic site, where we see an Arbiter talking kindly to his troops.
What if the infection defiles the relic? I care not for your little life.
And forcing them to open the doors to the relic. Back up in space, Anders insists she needs to head down to the planet to see what the Covenant have dug up, so they can figure out why the enemy wants it. The captain agrees and gives her the go-ahead. But before she arrives, you need to destroy a Covenant base and stop them from blowing up the relic site. With that done, Forge and Anders can get a closer look at the relic, which seems to be a star map, though before they can enjoy the light show, the Covenant ambush them and start your next mission, which is get Anders and Forge out of there. You get some help from Grizzly tanks that are sent down from the Spirit of Fire. These are really powerful units as they hold their own against a ton of Covenant forces. Too bad you only get to use them in certain missions. With the Grizzlies there, you mow through the Covenant to the exit where Forge and Anders get taken to safety, and forget about the rest of the units left behind as they get to do the dress rehearsal for Halo Reach. Back on the ship, Anders tells Captain Cutter the star map was pointing to a planet called Arcadia. She also says they should investigate it right away to figure out what the Covenant are up to. Captain Cutter a bit reluctantly agrees to go, while Serena and Anders get a little catty with each other over the decision.
Aye, sir. Crazy mystery trip to Arcadia plotted in, spinning up FTL drive.
Serena, get out of my lab.
The Spirit of Fire arrives at Arcadia and isn't looking so great, as the local fleet has taken a beating and the Covenant have launched an assault on the local population. So it's time to cue up the choir because you need to go help some Spartans save an evacuation effort. Now, this being the first mission with the Spartans in it, you don't actually get to control them, though you do get to see them hold their own against the enemy. For this mission, you need to help Spartans get civilians to slightly fragile transports while defending them. The first time playing this mission, I thought I'd messed up because no matter what I did, this one transport kept being taken out. But it turns out it's scripted to be that way, so you can never actually save that one transport. The game doesn't really make this clear, and I wasn't really a fan of that design choice. So after figuring that out, I focused on the other transports. The level is a little tricky but doable, and apparently is the hardest level in the game, which I'll agree is true. I mean, it's no Ground Zeroes from Tiberian Wars. That level almost broke me, and is a story for another day. Though this level has its moments. Like, I think the devs wanted to make you feel the unending struggle of trying to defend humanity against the Covenant in this level, which it does, but a bit of that is because it's unclear what you can save, not just the difficulty. After saving the transports, the next mission is taking what's left of your forces to a more defendable position outside the city. You just need to total up and slowly work your way through the enemy positions on the map until Spartan Team Omega arrives, then you can demolish what's left of the enemy. It's fun controlling a large group of Spartans, though once the mission is done, most of Omega Team is off to save the galaxy somewhere else.
This is Omega Team. This sector is clear. We're gone.
With that done, Forge heads back to the Spirit of Fire, where he finds out about a new problem. The Covenant have set up a large energy shield, and Captain Cutter wants to know what they are doing underneath it. And the Spirit of Fire can't bombard it from orbit, as it might destroy whatever is underneath it. So Anders comes up with a way to bring it down a little less forcefully, with some prototype weapons, but she needs to monitor them directly on the ground for it to work. Which means Nathan Forge is going to have to babysit a planet side again. No eye rolls this time, just a smirk. This is the most character development you're going to get out of this story. The mission is very straightforward, just build up your forces while defending the rhinos taking down the shield. And once the shields are down, you can safely use the ship's mech cannons to take out the Covenant base inside without breaking anything else in the shield. Meanwhile, on another planet far away, the story gets a little interesting as the Arbiter and his Prophet boss have a chat about how they can speed up wiping out humanity. It seems whatever they found thanks to the relic can help with that, but they can't access it. But they know Anders was able to activate the star map in the relic site back on Harvest. So the Prophet orders the Arbiter to go get her so he can use her to get access to the other Forerunner goodies they found. They don't need to worry about that for a little while, as back on Arcadia you have a bigger problem to deal with. As the UNSC forces go into the shielded area, they come across a half-finished Scarab which, even though it can't move, can easily wipe out any unit it sees. With micromanaging of units and taking out optional power nodes to slow the Scarab down, you manage to take it out. After that, while Forge and Anders investigate the remains of the Scarab, the Arbiter shows up and attempts to kidnap Anders. Nathan Forge tries to stop him from taking her, but gets taken out pretty easy, and Anders steps in to save him by telling the Arbiter she'll go with him willingly if he lets Forge live. He agrees and they both get levitated back to the Covenant dropship. Now you might be wondering where the Spartans were when all this was happening. Don't worry, here they come. I mean, I appreciate the effort of shooting wildly into there after the bad guys have left, but it's a little too late. I know the scene is supposed to be a bit dramatic, but for some reason when I watched this the first time, when the Spartans came driving like mad while shooting at nothing, it just made me giggle a little. It's like they got caught slacking and now they're really trying to overcompensate. Anyway, back to business. Forge lets Captain Cutter know that Anders has been taken by the Covenant, so Serena starts tracking Anders' transponder, which is leaving the planet rapidly and they're going to lose the signal if they don't follow her. So Captain Cutter makes the call to follow her, as she does have some UNSC secrets that they don't want the Covenant to know. Oh, and Nathan Forge wants to rescue her. That should be enough if you want to play the story campaign yourself, so if you don't want spoilers then skip to here. Okay, cool, now we can talk about the Flood. So the Spirit of Fire follows the transponder to the middle of uncharted space, to a planet that's infested with the Flood.
One of them bit me and ran off. Is that bad?
Yes, that's very bad. So if you don't know, the Flood is basically a parasite that makes space zombies, and was so dangerous that the Forerunners needed to hit the reset button on all sentient life in the entire galaxy to get rid of them. Apparently even that ultra extreme measure didn't work well enough, as there are still some around. Though they seem contained to this planet, so not so bad, I guess. I was a bit surprised to see them in this game, as from what I know they are the big bad in the main Halo game set about 20 years later. And them being set loose earlier than that seems to me like it might add some plot holes, but apparently it doesn't. Anyway, the first few missions where you fight them are okay after arriving on the planet, and they do add a bit of variety to what you've gone against before. But also they don't really add much to the story in this game, as they are just used as a hurdle for the UNSC to get past to get to Anders, rather than being a major threat to deal with. And once you make it past them, you get another little surprise by finding out the planet is actually a Forerunner shield world, which means the technology inside is very old and very powerful. How powerful? Well, it comes with Tesla auto parking, but for ships, and you don't really get an opt-in or out option. As the crew in the Spirit of Fire find out when the shield world starts pulling the ship into dock, even though they really don't want to. It's not so bad until you find out that some of the Flood managed to attach to the hull of the ship, and if you don't get it cleaned off, the shield world drones might destroy the ship. When you get that sorted, you literally run into the Covenant inside the shield world, which is a lot to take in.
So, am I the only one freaked out by the fact we're inside the planet?
You kind of get a repeat of the last mission, but this time you're fighting off the Covenant while making repairs to the ship. These two missions on the whole are interesting, as you need to micromanage units while dealing with the main objective of enemies attacking. Though the one thing that did annoy me a bit is that you get to use this really useful repair unit called a Cyclops, and after these two missions you don't get to use them again. Like, why take them away? They aren't OP like the Grizzlies. Anyway, back to the story. With the Spirit of Fire closing in on Anders, the Arbiter forces her to activate the Forerunner tech he's after, which turns out to be a fleet of ships that would be powerful enough to overwhelm the entire UNSC forces and wipe out humanity. Though while the Arbiter enjoys seeing his new toys, Anders manages to escape with a teleporter, but not quite to safety, as some Flood try to infect her. However, Nathan Forge arrives just in time to save her while making a quick one-liner.
Lady, I haven't got all day. You want to be rescued or not?
This leads to a level I thought was going to be an escort mission, which I'm not a fan of in games, but I thought let's just get it over with. It is for a little bit, but changes quickly into an enjoyable one where you need to clear the area of Covenant and you get to use a scarab, which was a lot of fun. So at this point I was thinking, these devs know that escort missions generally suck. Wait, why are they lowering that heavy looking cargo? Okay, so it turns out that Anders comes up with a plan to stop the Covenant from using the Forerunner's fleet, by using the Spirit of Fire's FTL drive to blow up the sun in the middle of the shield world. This means it will take a few decades for the ship to get home, but it will get rid of the Forerunner fleet and save humanity. Oh good, they're flying it in, so I don't need to... Damn it. So you need to escort the FTL drive up ramps to a drop-off point at the top, and to be fair the mission isn't too bad, as the further you get up the easier the mission becomes. I still didn't like it. After getting the FTL drive to the top, Nathan Forge and some Spartans get ambushed by elites and the Arbiter. It's a great cinematic to watch as Spartans show off some fighting skills against elites, and Forge gets to settle his lost fight against the Arbiter from earlier in the story. Though they throw in the self-sacrifice twist here where someone needs to set off the FTL drive to blow up manually, and Nathan Forge nominates himself instead of one of the Spartans. I didn't get too attached to his character during the story, so it didn't really have any dramatic weight. So pretty much cheers Nathan Forge. Anyway, the Spirit of Fire needs to get clear before Forge goes boom, but the exit portal is blocked. So the final mission is you taking on the Covenant and the Flood while opening the portal door in the right order. Oh, and it's time too. It's not too bad, but those scarabs in the middle of the map can be a challenge to deal with. But I got it done with plenty of time to spare. The story ends dramatically with the Spirit of Fire doing its best impression of the Millennium Falcon flying away from the Death Star, and a few weeks later the crew having to go into cryosleep for the long journey back to known space, and an end transmission message implying more to come. Overall the game is good and I enjoyed playing through it. The gameplay, which is simple to a degree because of the way it was designed to work on consoles rather than PC first, actually offers a slightly different but interesting way to play that you can't say for most RTS games that made the attempt to be playable on console. So while not being perfect in control, I did have a good time playing it, as it does get the basics of an RTS right. The story brings some of the Halo vibes from what I can tell, and is better than some of the other Halo stories I've seen, but I didn't get too invested in any of the characters as they were mostly forgettable apart from the Spartans, which had some pretty good action scenes, making it worth going through the game to see them be badasses. So I can recommend trying this game out if you see it on sale anyway. I would have liked to have seen what Ensemble could have done with a sequel, but that got passed on to 343 and Creative Assembly, which I'll maybe check out one day. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then consider subscribing. Thanks for watching. See you next time.